Welcome to Life Design Diaries. It's very nice to be back. I've not been on one for ages. I feel like a bit of a guest on this show.
You are now.
So I hope everybody is having a really lovely day. We thought we'd bring a little bit of a different one to you today and have a conversation about that question that is asked all the time. It doesn't matter what situation you're in. You could be talking to a nan's friend or someone you've just met in the bar. And it is, so what do you do?
Yep. It comes up a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, it comes up all the time. I
think it's easier to answer if you're doing something which is like what you would coin a conventional job. You would be able to say, oh, I'm an accountant or I'm a doctor. But however, I think for the people that certainly I've been meeting recently, like, you know, Julian at Huel on our last episode, he was in exactly the same boat. Said at the start, when he's kind of building something, when he's doing something different, he really struggles to answer that. And I think that becomes because it's not quite formed yet. In the first, I don't know, year, 6 months, year, 3 years, however long it takes, and you're kind of doing something different outside employed life. It's not, whatever you're doing might not be fully formed yet. It's kind of in between. It's still building. And so for you to answer that is really, really difficult because you almost don't want to label it or stamp it because it can change as well. There's
so many layers to it. Like for me, I don't like necessarily, I've only just started getting comfortable with actually answering succinctly what I do. One, because I don't want to come across like, oh, hey, I've got my own business or, you know, I'm very conscious of coming across like that. And also, I don't want to be held accountable if I decide to change my mind.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so it's like, oh, well, I thought you were doing that, and now you're doing that. And I do know people that flit and change, and that's fine, and that's all kind of part of going it alone and trying to make a living in maybe a direction that might be a passion or something that you're good at. But you really do have to try things. And for me, I don't like the question, and I certainly don't like answering the question because I don't like the unknown of what that other person might be thinking or what they might think if something does change, or maybe I'm not doing as well, or I just feel like when you ask that question and that person is not necessarily just self-employed, but if they're trying to get a business off the ground, you're just so vulnerable, I think. It makes me feel vulnerable.
Why do you think people ask that question then?
Oh, I think loads of reasons. Like you said, it's a bit of a lazy question, and it's everybody asks it, so everybody asks it. I think people also ask it in a non-cynical way to try and find some common ground so that you can continue the conversation, because work is such a huge part of people's lives. Yeah. But then also in the cynical way, it's also a way to sort of benchmark yourself across the table from the person you're speaking to. And
that's the bit that's like negative about it, isn't it? Is that naturally, I mean, we all are constantly judging people anyway in everything we do. Whenever you see someone, you're judging them, you know, even if you don't want to, you have a bias around, you know, your thoughts and experiences. But yeah, certainly with that question, when someone's asked it as what do you do, and then you're about to answer, there's comes an immediate judgment, doesn't there?
Yeah.
Even if you're like me now talking about it, consciously aware not to. I remember, because I have used to go to loads and loads of networking events, and I spoke to quite a lot of accountants, so apologize if there's any accountants listening, but they just basically talked about how they hate answering that question with I'm an accountant, because the person that's asked it switches off. Yeah, you know, that's their stigma. I'm boring. And so what's really interesting is, as I've had like different sales training and networking training over the years, it's how to best answer that question. And obviously an accountant could say I'm an accountant, or they could say, oh, I help businesses with their finances, etc. And that has a different, it doesn't say the word accountant, which can immediately turn people off. So, but then that comes on to the question of how best answer that then.
Well, I was going to say, because we were talking about this before, like you get all the sales training that says, don't say you're a salesperson, say you're a creative that goes into businesses and helps sales magic butterflies.
Exactly, yeah.
But, don't do that. It's you sniff out the bullshit in a minute. You do need to have a pretty solid and simple answer for the question without coming across like an absolute...
Yeah, you can smell it. But also, whenever I've had someone do that to me, or even tried it, because it's important to try different things. This is a networking event situation. If you're at a Christmas party with friends, and you just say what you do. But like, at a networking event, you could try, I help brands grow online, for example. But then normally the next question always is, so what do you actually do then? Yeah. And then you're like, I do this.
Yeah, I'm a digital marketing.
Exactly.
Like
so it's like, even if you try to fluff it up, that's like what you said. I think people can just kind of smell that.
Yeah. Particularly now, the kind of job titles and stuff that are coming out of particularly agencies, like... the one that comes to mind is head of happiness, but actually I think that's quite a good job title. Just like I can't think of you
see it on LinkedIn, don't you?
Yeah.
Interesting though. I think this also falls into LinkedIn, because if you look at people's LinkedIn bios, everyone's trying to kind of say what they do.
That one you showed me the other day when it was like 16 jobs in the last year, and all our founders
head of this, founder of that, CEO and chief exec. Yeah, no, that was, you can really beef yourself up on LinkedIn, can't you? But, it's interesting how, basically, it's how you want to portray yourself, isn't it, I think? And the fascinating thing I have with this question is what do you do, is, we said then it is a bit of a lazy question. And I think at a networking place, you're talking about business, it has its place. But it's when to kind of jump in with it, because what I don't like about it is how it kind of then defines you. How your job then becomes what you are. Like, what do you do? Oh, that's you then. Like we said, accountant is boring. It might be a really exciting guy. I
know the most amazing accountant. She's much more fun than I am.
Yeah. And when someone asks that and they hear an accountant, they immediately judge, which is just...
Yeah. And I find it's probably like, hi, my name is Lucy. And then the answer is, so what do you do? Like, it's one of the first questions that I'm asked. Doesn't matter in what situation. You could be at a wedding. Doesn't have to be in that kind of formal networking. You would expect it to an extent at a networking event, I guess. But I agree with you. I don't like that it defines whether I'm a good human or not. Do you know what I mean? Like,
it depends what job role you're coming up with.
Well, no, but like... But in the eyes of the person that's asking the question.
Yeah, you're being judged to a degree. Even if, we're not talking about this cynically, it's kind of like a fact, isn't it? That people naturally would judge based on that. And so, I think it's important to, and also it can change, that from 6 months, you could change your career type, job role, whatever. And so that the answer to that question can change. I guess it's, if someone's extremely happy in their role, proud of their role, proud of what they're doing, then they would absolutely love that question, because they just answer it with pride. But then comes, I think, where you're looking at me like you're about to go somewhere, with the fact that people are then too happy to share their good experiences. You had that experience recently, didn't you?
Yeah, but before I forget about it, what I was actually going to come back to is something that Julian said to you from Huel, said to you that in his first business, he wasn't particularly proud of it, although he became proud of it because it was making him money and it became a bit of a passion, but explaining what it was and then standing behind it in those early days. And like, I think that a big part of not being able to answer the question with a great deal of enthusiasm is that passion behind it, or pride, So I think that's actually what I was going to come to. But no, who
were talking about a guy that's really bigging himself up.
Oh, at the bar, yeah. Oh my God. But that was like complete. That was just some guy telling me how great he was, and I came away thinking, never in any world would I stand in front of a stranger and tell them how great I was. And it was just a classic man situation, and I was just sat there like, what are you doing, you fool? It was just so stupid. But anyway
just a man situation.
It's just a man situation, alone at a bar, and he pounced. Anyway, so I want to come back to how people allow, and how this question, not directly, but I think it definitely aids the way that we're all totally defined by the work and the way that we make money. And I think I don't really know what the answer is to not allowing it to define you, because it's something that we spend so much time doing and working towards. And
yeah, and like you said, it's such a huge part of your life, isn't it, what you're doing?
Yeah, exactly. But like, I know that sometimes when I've been asked that question and I've not been able to answer it properly, or Ross used to take the mick out of me when we would be away and someone had asked what I do, and I'd kind of mumble the answer and he'd make me redo it in front of the person because I'm so bad at answering the question. How many times did you make me do that?
I only joke that you make that sound like that's a training camp or something.
Yeah, it is
do
like
it
a
again.
training
Not
camp.
good enough.
Yeah.
5
Or if
out of
someone
10.
said, so what do you guys do? Ross would shoot a look at me like, you can do it because you're so bad at answering this question. You need to practice. But I'd come away from that feeling really shit, you know, like, because I didn't have the self-belief to stand behind that question with loads of conviction and make that other person believe, actually, oh, she's worthy of me continuing the conversation, because that's how it can make you feel, can't it?
Definitely, because you're so aware of that element of judgment, and it's like one of the only times that you're so put on the spot with such a direct, it's such a lazy question, but it's a direct question, isn't it? It's like, what do you do?
It's actually really personal.
Your time to speak now.
I wouldn't have said that when I was employed, when I was working at Social Chain, for example, because I knew exactly what I was doing.
So it's
and
just job title at job company.
Job title, at a really brilliant company. So it was completely different because I could stand behind it with like pride and passion, and there's loads of things going on. It was really exciting, and it wasn't so egotistical to stand there and go, oh, actually I run this company called 6 Stories and it's really good at the moment because so and so are going to take us on and we're going to be on the high street. Do you know what I mean? If someone stood in front of me, I might, saying all of that, I might be like, I don't really care.
yeah Well, that's interesting you say that about you don't care, because the other thing is, and again, you get taught this loads as you go to like sales training and stuff, but at the end of the day, the person asking it, they are trying to look for common ground, like you said, normally. Yeah. And so, although they're interested to a degree, it is important to try and position it back so that they would care, because like you said, if you just went off on one and started really going into what you like, really answering that question in detail, it almost gets to a point where it's like, I don't actually care that much.
I was just asking for something to ask. But I guess for something that I've tried to do is be comfortable answering that question. And I have practiced in front of you before, haven't I? Like, okay, so what do I say if someone asks me what I'm doing now?
Every Wednesday we practice. Wednesday at 6 p.m.
Sorry about my squeaky chair, by the way. Practice what the answer is and what I feel comfortable telling the next person, but also really not letting it bother me, because actually I'm doing what I'm doing and I should be proud of what I'm doing, and and not thinking about it too much, because actually it's not that big a deal. So I guess that's something that I'm trying to, because I think about like what I used to do and what I do now. It does make me laugh. I have that conversation quite a few times with my friends. Like, I used to put high heels on and mooch around Manchester selling, and now selling.
Well, like you say as well, it always changes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It always, like anything you're doing now, it changes. So it's a difficult one to answer. Absolutely, it is a difficult one to answer if you've got a few things on the go, particularly if they're early stage.
Yeah.
So
I think it's really interesting topic. Maybe think about it the next time you ask it to someone, and don't let it define the conversation. And don't worry about it if you're asked about it, I think.
Yeah, I think if you're being asked it, just try a few. If you struggle with this, then it's probably worth trying a few different answers.
What we'll do is we'll send Ross round for the What Do You Do training session that he's providing. Yeah.
Well, it is important to try. If you're not happy with how that answer comes across, then it's worth thinking about this and actually coming up with a few different answers and seeing how that then
kind of how they fall out of your mouth.
Because all you want is the conversation to carry on flowing, don't you? And if there's common ground there, then that's good. If there's not, then it depends what kind of circumstance you're in as to how long you spend speaking to that person. But like if it's in a business sense, for example. But I think the overall important message to remember is that the answer to that question, what do you do, like really does not define you. So if you're feeling bad about that, or even if you're feeling good about that, like that, it's not the be all and end all. You know, there's way more to people than a job title, you know, as to what you're doing. So I think it's important to just remember that it absolutely doesn't define you.